watched this Jimmy the Giant video about how he escaped the alt-right, and apparently he actually gives a shout out to Destiny in here somewhere, but I still want to watch it.
You might have noticed, you know, through some of my videos, I officially joined the woke brigade. It's unfortunate, I didn't really want to, but I'm going to talk how we got here. My political arc has been pretty insane. At one point, I was in a Nico Malama video supporting Trump. That's me. I'll admit it. Blurry boy.
Trump supporters UK. I'm here. Look at my hat. I love Donald Trump.
So today we're going to talk about how I managed to escape the alt-right pipeline.
Up yours, woke moralists. How big is Luton?
It's 200,000 population.
And how many lost?
45.
Alongside racist rhetoric.
Seems Jimmy the Giant was a real Brexit geezer. What the happened? What the happened, Jimmy? You were on the right side of history, mate. Lad, you were a proper bloke. A proper Brexit geezer. The woke got you, eh?
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh. I'm about 13 years old.
And this motherfucker looked like JonTron.
We're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited. And we had to do a speech. So, you know, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. A girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalize a classroom of young, impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Who do you believe was behind 9/11?
Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex, the same ones that staged Gulf of Tonkin, the same ones that staged Operation, the mass shootings of Operation Gladio.
Right.
Ooh.
I was in this kind of like early conspiracy theory bubble. But what I want to say is it was interesting, right? Because at that time, being a conspiracy theorist wasn't left and right. It was just anti-establishment. And so whilst I was listening to Alex Jones, I'd also be listening to the Young Turks and listening about Occupy Wall Street. So when I was young, I was just a sort of contrarian hipster. I'm not like a communist, but I'm definitely not a capitalist, and I'm definitely left-wing, and I definitely voted to remain in the EU referendum. And so time goes by, I grow up, and I remember I got, you know, I had a few jobs working like fucking Sainsbury's or B&Q, and that was further fueling my sort of anti-capitalist feelings. But I remember I got one job, and I met this geezer, and he was a proper right-winger.
Capitalism is good because capitalism is freedom. Socialism is bad because socialism is tyranny.
It was like a right-winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck hell is this? Capitalism good? Welfare state bad? NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you gotta remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment. Non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy lapped up this sort of right-wing rhetoric because I realized it was different to everyone else, and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right? And like when I say right-wing, it's not, you know, we don't like foreigners. It's stuff like this.
The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare.
It's really funny because the presentation of this stuff is considered anti-establishment, but it is the most establishment you can get. That's what's hilarious about it. When you have a guy like Milton Friedman being portrayed as an anti-establishment figure, like I'm not, you know, shitting on current Jimmy, right? But I'm saying that like there are a lot of people who probably have had this exact same experience where they think liberalism is woke video games or whatever the right? And it's anti-establishment to be conservative because everything is liberal and woke video games. When this guy is the most established right-winger you can get, like as established as you can get. His worldview is the neoliberal uniparty. I mean, yeah, he was a Reagan advisor personally. His writings, his academic literature played a formative role in undermining the global South. It does not get more establishment than that. Just like it doesn't get more like your dad's point of view than Ben Shapiro.
Fair supervisor who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children.
So now I'm at the doors of the alt-right pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe, and I head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she, how would you respond to that on a personal level? How would...
The way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're projecting publicly.
How can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off, because she, he, they, their, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad.
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I went and just tried to make little businesses. I did a parkour brand, I ran a vegan food store, I did lots of little things. And very importantly, I was not academic.
This motherfucker was all over the place, bro, politically.
Jordan Peterson, to young Jimmy, sounded like how I imagine smart people sound.
So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
He would use big words, he would do this with his hands, he would think and contemplate. Like, he was the sort of caricature of a smart person. And it was very interesting because all of his views tended to be quite contrarian.
I think there's something really interesting about this, especially if Destiny played a formative role in him escaping the alt-right pipeline. What this man doesn't recognize is that he went from one, contrarian figurehead to the other, who also falsely presents themselves as like an intellectual giant. Ultimately, though, I will say it's marginally better, I guess, as long as he doesn't pick up on a lot of the other habits, like advocating for white people's right to say the N-word or whatever the you know what I mean? Or constantly spending time and effort on shitting on left-wing people, or, getting a little too close and personal with neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
Two sort of mainstream views. And he would, again, like my friend, he would talk about the benefits of capitalism. He would talk about natural hierarchies and that it wasn't capitalism's fault for hierarchies, but hierarchies are natural. And so it's very interesting because if you think about what Jordan Peterson is and what he thinks and his words now, back in 2016, it was very different, right?
As a matter of respect, in fact, would you refer to a trans person who asked you to use they, them pronouns, a pronoun which has a several hundred-year historical...
But that's not what we're talking about.
He rises to fame on what he is portraying as a free speech battle. The Canadian government are trying to make it so that if you say the wrong pronouns to a transgender person, you will go to jail. And Jordan Peterson never says something like, I don't...
By the way, that's not even true. I think we always forget to factor in how much of right-wing sentiment is just a lie, and how effective just simply lying from a biased perspective is. I know he doesn't have these opinions, by the way. Now, I'm saying that, like, I'm talking to old Jimmy, right? Old Jimmy the Giant, Jimmy the Little, before he became Jimmy the Giant. It's pretty interesting that an expansion of pre-existing hate crime statutes factored in misgendering, like intentional and deliberate routine misgendering, got so much pickup all around the planet, and it got so bad the Canadian Bar Association had to basically write out statements over and over again being like, this is not true, like what Jordan Peterson is saying is just a lie, and nobody cared. Everyone got swept away.
I don't believe in trans people, and so I don't believe I should say their pronouns. He's not saying that people who do transgender surgeries are butchers. He is saying that by law, I shouldn't be forced to say anything.
Difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologism of radical PC authoritarians.
As I grew up, I kind of realized he misrepresented this bill and he was blowing things out of proportion. But if we just take it on face value and believe what he was saying, then yeah, it seemed illogical to oppose what he was saying. And so whilst I'm going through Jordan Peterson's books, his podcasts, his speeches, etc., I'm getting this feeling that there's this sort of crazy, indoctrinated Marxist left who are trying to suppress your freedom and usher in communism. And so all this is happening all the way in Canada where no one gives a fuck about. But what about here in Britain, right? In Britain, we have a sort of similar scenario. And it involves a very controversial man by the name of Tommy Robinson.
Hard to understand Wagwan with Jank. My Steelman take is maybe he's big braining to influence Trump by pandering. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think this guy likes me much. I think we see the world in very similar ways, but I think he's been primed into not liking me too much. But maybe it'll change. We'll see. I arrived at you through Destiny, then Vosh, then you. That's a crazy journey, my man. Holy shit. That's a wild journey. I wonder if he ever watched this video, because he said he was a fan of the Young Turks. And I wonder if he actually ended up watching this video called Jordan Peterson is not a conservative transphobe. This is from December 30th, 2018. Here's the thing. Back then, I understood that Jordan Peterson was a conservative transphobe. This is clickbait title, chat. And I wanted to get people exactly like Jimmy the Giant to click on this video and watch this video. My arguments haven't really changed.
This the Quran around in your hand
book is
in
the
that
reason,
disgraceful manner.
This book is
outrageous.
This book is the reason we're in such a mess.
Stay back!
Tommy Robinson, the fucking ADO lad! Sorry.
Boys, I'm not proud of this, but I'm just being an honest person. I'm trying to explain where I was at, how I got to where I was, and how I am where I am now. And so I come across Tommy Robinson in this period of time where he goes to jail for, as he's presenting it to the audience online, trying to report on Muslim grooming gangs. He goes to jail, and I see this as a suppression of journalism, a suppression of free speech by a tyrannical government.
With justice, do regret inciting vigilante.
You know, and I ignored the fact that it was contempt to court, and he knew exactly it was contempt to court, and he did it deliberately to provoke this reaction. But the way it was being presented was very clever. Again, it was all about free speech. It wasn't about the underlying issue of Islam, etc., but it was just about free speech. And so when you're already primed to be sort of libertarian, pro-free speech, and you're perceiving these attacks on free speech, you start to wonder, why are they attacking these people for their speech? And it unfortunately has this effect of making you think that the person is a truth teller and the government are trying to suppress them. And it reinforces your belief in what they're saying must have some truth to it if they want to hide it so bad. And these people, these what I would now consider grifters, they know that. They know that that's the response and the feeling it's going to create in people. They want to be martyrs because then people will follow them even more ardently.
It's so important for the establishment because they know it brings the people.
Free Tommy Robinson and free him now.
Gert Wilders, just the peanut gallery of some of the worst scumbags, dude. Holy shit.
And so, yeah, I go to like a rally, like a free speech rally when Tommy Robinson's about to go to jail. And I come across Nico, and I see Nico, and I've seen him online. And I saw how he was trying to present everyone that went to a Tommy Robinson rally as a racist. And I knew from my perspective and knowing who I was, I knew I wasn't a racist. And so I go up to Nico and I tell the people around him that he's trolling you and he's trying to like make you look stupid online. And then Nico does.
Jimmy tweeted at me, he said, cheers for watching. I'm gonna have him on the stream if he wants to after we're done watching this video.
Misrepresent me in the video, and he says that I went up to the police and told them to get rid of Nico.
The police then came over and surprise, he started crying to them as well.
When in reality, I was actually saying to the police that Nico has his free speech. Because, you know, I'm fucking obsessed with free speech in this period of time. I don't know why. I think it's the single most important thing on earth. But either way, like, as much as I disagree with myself for being at that rally and supporting Tommy Robinson in that time, I still stand by the fact that I don't think these people understood why people were presenting them as racist, right? And I just want to touch on that.
Tell me a Trump policy right now.
I support...
Fake, waffle. You're waffling, man. Yeah, answer the question.
I support his trade policy.
How dare you fake this? How dare you?
You know, now, from, you know, the view I have now, I understand there are sort of two types of racism. There's like overt racism, which is like, you know, I fucking hate migrants when you send them back, they're the worst. And then you have this kind of more like subconscious racism, or like in effect racism. And what I mean by that is like, I knew I wasn't racist because I grew up.
Oh my God. This is literally, he's talking about the permission structure. Permissible bigotry versus that masquerades as common sense versus out and about racism that even racist people go, over. Now, the interesting part about this is something I talk about quite frequently, as you guys know. The interesting part about this also is that depending on where you're at on the reactionary spectrum, like going to a literal EDL rally, you could still assume that you're not a racist person. And I think ultimately that's because no matter how much we yell at people and say society is racist or whatever, even racists understand that racism is bad up to a certain point, which is why they always subconsciously or sometimes deliberately and consciously try to hide their true perspective. Some people might not even recognize that this is their true perspective. And I believe Jimmy when he says he didn't understand why people were saying he was racist. Like, I just care about free speech. That was the entry point for him. People making convincing arguments. People telling him like, oh no, this is common sense and this is free speech. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who are rudderless, who are fragile, who are vulnerable, and people like Jordan Peterson open up the floodgates and move them in the direction of the likes of Tommy Robinson. It's a perfect ideological journey. I mean, it's obvious. He went from watching Jordan Peterson videos and thinking that Jordan Peterson is not like right wing at all. He's just like some Canadian professor who is using neutral language, using objective language, and is just simply saying it like it is, to a guy like Tommy fucking Robinson and Douglas Murray. I hate this piece of shit.
Very multiculturally. And I liked people of different races. I had lots of friendships with them and I got along with them very well. So I never in my heart felt anything bad towards people of different races. But what can happen from there is when you think you're like immune to racism, you sometimes are more susceptible to it in a way, but just a different type of racism. These grifters know they can't just say that, I don't know, black people are inferior genetically, although some of them have started doing that again. They've found sneakier ways of wrapping it, often by hiding behind culture. These pundits will lie and say stuff like 84% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani, which has been endlessly disproven. It is white people who make up the majority of grooming gangs. But all this misinformation can lead you to believe that their culture is inferior to ours, and therefore we can't mix. And with the Tommy Robinson thing, it's kind of the same when it comes to Islam, right? You didn't hate people for being like,
this guy's awesome. I love this video. Holy shit. Amazing.
Having brown skin. You were simply critiquing their ideology, their beliefs.
You wouldn't do that with
Sir William
Would you
Gladstone
do that with
said
the
that.
Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this
for people?
Have you read this?
Piers Morgan, the fucking woke Quran defender, by the way. God and Piers, man. What a fucking clown! This is bellend on bellend violence, mate.
There are
There's
over
a
a
hundred-
billion
there are
people.
100.
So, you know, I'm listening to the greatest hits, right? I'm listening to Ben Shapiro debate some 12-year-old feminist. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, I'm Joe Rogan till I fucking die. And I find myself accepting that I must be right-wing now. And, you know, little hipster Jimmy, that's cool because now I'm different to everyone. I'm the contrarian, right? I have all the different opinions. Oh no, the sky isn't blue. Actually, no, it's a shade of maroon. And like when you're listening to all this stuff, you get this sort of impression of the left, like what you're perceiving the left to be like, basically the worst of the left.
You know you're a millennial when you question whether or not it's ethical to bring children into this world. Because of climate change, we don't really know whether or not the world's going to be habitable in 30 years.
And so you just get pushed further and further right from more of a reactionary position rather than some actual ideological and maybe academic understanding of economies and politics. It just sort of is a feeling. And it's so funny, like when Ben Shapiro and these sort of people get famous off of facts don't care about your feelings. But to be honest, like conservatives these days, it just seems to be mainly emotion. It's how they feel about topics.
That's, dude, perfect. No notes. And that's always been the case, by the way. Just so people understand. Conservative argumentation has never been around facts. Ben Shapiro actually marketed himself as like the facts-based champion, but I have hours upon hours of video dedicated specifically to how not facts-based Ben Shapiro's arguments are. They've only been able to successfully market themselves as quote-unquote facts-based. But in fact, most of it is just, and this is unfortunately a common trait for all debate lords in general, debate lording online in an unstructured setup that doesn't have like points or whatever, is simply who can rationalize logical fallacies faster and justify it. That's all debates devolve into. And I say this as someone who has also, you know, partaken in this. I have done it myself and I still continue to do it myself because I understand like hypocrisy baiting and logical fallacies are actually a very quick way to win points in this conversation, to win people over to your side. But yeah, make no mistake, Republicans have never, ever, ever had facts on their side. They just haven't. They do, however, massage the data. They do a very good job of that, but lately they haven't even tried to massage the data because it doesn't really matter. There's no need for them to massage the data because there is a fucking faucet of right-wing media out there that just reinforces this false notion over and over and over again. And many people don't even want the truth. There's no more intellectual curiosity, okay? We've gotten to a point where people just want someone who agrees with them to tell them they're right.
They hate when you bring up academic papers and actual facts, and they don't trust any of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
And either way, I find myself as a right-winger. I have not descended into overtly racist beliefs or overtly transphobic beliefs, misogynistic beliefs. I haven't gone that far, but I probably do house some sort of unconscious discriminatory beliefs in maybe trans people.
Bro, first of all, you're British. That's just given. It's just a part of the territory. Secondly, I think the very fact that you acknowledge that is an incredibly healthy step, okay? Like awareness, self-awareness of this sort is so fucking good, dude. Holy shit. It's fantastic. And people will say, he's a right-winger. No, he used to be a former right-winger. And he's saying he still has some subconscious biases. And it's great. It's fantastic to recognize that and work against them. You know what I mean? And learn and go on your journey of understanding the truth about the world.
People, perhaps even women to a degree, again, often wrapping their push for equality and better rights as some kind of Marxist revolution. But I believe in the typical sort of right-wing viewpoint that the state should be smaller, that people are responsible for themselves, and probably that like poor people are just lazy and they need to fix their own shit, and that billionaires and corporations are really good and like, you know, sort of, unless
he's saying that was his former position.
They're the ones that, I don't know, Russell Brand says is bad, and then all of a sudden they're bad because they're tied to, I don't know, George Soros. George Soros business, bad. Bill Gates business, bad. But Elon Musk buying Twitter, good. Very good. Anyway, I'm deep in the pipeline, right? I'm deep. COVID happens. Obviously, I don't get vaxxed. I don't wear the mask. I'm sorry if I killed anyone. And, you know, again, I regret that position now. I literally didn't want to get vaxxed, not because I thought it had 5G in it or something, but just because I was so sort of libertarian right-wing that I didn't like the fact the government were telling me to do it. And like, I don't know, I'm here today, I'm vaccinated, and the woke police haven't come to my door yet. So probably I was overreacting.
Vaccine passports. While we've been looking in other directions, they are being slowly yet deliberately introduced. Are they the linchpin in a global surveillance network?
So you might be wondering, like, what was the moment? Like, when did it all change? When did the dam break? And there was a moment, right? And I can kind of point to it specifically. And it was through making my videos. Now, as you know, you guys are watching, you're probably really into all the social political stuff I do. But originally, I was a parkour YouTuber. And then I become like an extreme sports YouTuber. And when I got to the end of this period in 2022, I wanted to diversify my content, right? And I remember genuinely, I thought I was probably even going to make like those sort of right-wing documentary series, like things like Jen or like some of Moon's stuff, you know, that kind of thing. I thought I'd end up in that ilk. But you see, because I was a smart bruh and I could read the room, I knew that I couldn't make a video why Jordan Peterson's the best man alive. I knew I had to take my time to kind of meander. So I made a video on a very specific topic.
Bro, this dude is literally talking about Tyler Hitler Vera's like origination point. It's kind of crazy. He could have gone down the fucking Tyler Hitler Vera pipeline, you know? Crazy.
About chavs.
Clothing brands that you didn't like were called chav. Rough neighborhoods were considered chav infested. But what exactly is a chav? And most importantly, where did they all go?
And so I made this video. It's really interesting if you rewatch it, because my biases and all of my thinking going into this video is that chavs are bad because they were dickheads and they chose to be bad. But whilst making the video and wanting to address the question, like, where did chavs go? Why did they disappear? I stumbled across a geezer called Owen Jones.
That's crazy. Owen Jones. That's amazing that Owen Jones flipped him, dude. That's amazing. Wait, what? What happened to the audio?
I see Owen Jones and all of my, but you see it in the video. I'm like, look, guys.
Never mind. It was not worthwhile to even complain about it. All right. Well,
to quote Owen Jones, I don't agree with him, but what he says about chavs is really interesting. You should probably listen to it.
Truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit, I don't really agree with him on a lot. He wrote an entire book called Chavs.
So I read it and I'm like, fuck, maybe chavs were like a product of their environment and their economic status. Bear in mind, this is the opposite. This is the antithesis of my view, is that I would have believed as a right-winger that cultures are just like people who make decisions to behave in...
Oh, shit. And that's when it clicks. Damn, we are victim to material circumstances. God damn, I need more of that good shit. Oh! What are chavs? Chavs are like low-ranking white folk, basically. They are the hicks. They're the youth. British hogs. Well, gammons are British hogs as well. Council housing and violence. That's what Chavs comes from. Yeah, they live in council housing, which is public housing in the UK. And they're poor. They're just poor white guys.
The way they want it. So these are bad people who are choosing to be bad. So after this video, I go down different rabbit holes. I'm making different subcultures. I do skin.
Bro gained material, bro gained class consciousness after he listened to one libtard defend his identity. I love that.
Heads, and I do football hooligans, which are both in a very interesting period of time, which is the Thatcher era. And the more I research into Thatcher...
Oh, to be fair, this also does make sense because, like, I think a lot of... It's really interesting when you see it, like, a lot of the Reform Party people just, like, despise Thatcher and despise neoliberalism and don't even fucking understand that, like, it is continued through the Tories that they voted for over and over again. And then they got frustrated by it and they're, like, now looking for a right-wing reactionary movement outside of the Labour-Tory dynamic. So I think that I would say working class British people are definitely more class conscious than working class American people are. It's weird. But then also at the same time, like there is, it's less mystified. Class is less mystified. But also Tories have successfully been able to shit on the working class. Whereas in America, historically speaking, since the Thatcher era, like they have lordships, right? In the UK, like they have people who are lords. They have something that transcends beyond Marxian class dynamics, where they literally have a monarchy and they have remnants of said monarchy in the form of lordship, right? Like you literally have lords. And they're Tories. There are plenty of Tories and even fucking Labour Party members as well, but like certainly a big chunk of Tories that are straight up a part of this old feudal dynamic. And on top of that, there is like open, overt disdain for the working class in the UK by, dare I say, liberal, neoliberal media outlets. And it's really interesting because the dynamic is very different in America, where there's no class consciousness, but that is precisely the reason why American right-wing politicians, especially from the Ronald Reagan era. Ronald Reagan is the Margaret Thatcher of America, by the way. Neoliberals, one is a Tory, the other one's a Republican. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, while implementing the same exact policies as Thatcher, adjusted to American material conditions, was actually hamming up this working class bona fide, this working class background that he didn't quite necessarily have, even though he was, I guess technically, if you want to call it that, a labor leader. He was, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, for those of you who don't know, but he basically portrayed himself as like this, as an actor, portrayed themselves as a fake working class hero. Whereas in the UK, these guys were like, they're elite. They did not hide that they were elite. They said that they were elite, and the working poor suck shit. So the working poor that now actually identify as like Reform Party members, weirdly enough, still hate Margaret Thatcher, not realizing that Reform is a modified version of Margaret Thatcher. So they looped back around with reactionary politics and white identitarian principles, for example, the anti-immigrant shit. They looped back around into believing that like Reform demonstrates a change from these austerity politics of the neoliberal Tory past. It's very interesting.
And see how she completely flipped this country on its head. She completely radicalized Britain into being extreme neoliberal capitalists. And it's kind of become just assumed that that's how the world has always worked. That's how we are. But then I discovered that at some point in society, we weren't fucking insane capitalists that we are right now. I've discovered this because there was a period of time called the post-war consensus, which I talk about fucking endlessly on this channel. But in that period of time, we followed a style of economics that was called Keynesianism.
This is, by the way, the British version of New Deal. This is the British New Deal Democrat era.
Which meant that the government's job was to make sure everyone was employed and to tax the wealthy at higher rates, use that money to build infrastructure that benefited the people. And
by the way, the shortcomings of Keynesian economics and the shortcomings of social democracy is that it inevitably opens up the floodgates, because it's always going to simply extend capitalism. And that same dynamic, that same class dynamic that exists in capitalism, the inherent contradictions, are always going to create a society that is susceptible to the same economic factors, and inevitably the capital owners will overcome any sort of socially democratic changes that former governance has implemented. And this comes in the form of austerity. This comes in the form of clawing back social safety nets and rampant privatization, which creates instability, which creates economic volatility. And in that process, you arrive at the likes of the reform movement.
Bear in mind, you know, I'm listening to Donald Trump saying, make America great again, and everyone's harping on about how the world was better back in like the 60s and 50s. And then I find out the reason why it was better was because we had mass public investment. This investment led to the greatest economic boom in history, raised many of the working class into the middle class, which created a whole host of new industries, new products, basically, it was good shit. What we did then was good. And you know, you got to bear in mind that I am being told the only answer to life's problems is dog eat dog, free market capitalism. Get the government out of everything. The government can do nothing right. Only the geniuses of commerce can do anything. Like,
it's funny because it's like these guys always go with the real capitalism hasn't worked.
Do anything. Like our water supply that has no piss and poo in it. Or like our really quick and definitely on time and affordable train system. Or like our really affordable housing that people definitely aren't speculating on and shrinking the middle class.
Private water companies are dumping huge amounts of raw sewage in Britain's rivers and off its coastlines. They're doing so to save money, to ensure returns for shareholders, and by extension, to guarantee massive salaries for bosses at the top.
And so yeah, time's going past, man, and I'm learning this shit, and I'm like, fuck, and I'm starting to realize, like, I don't know if I believe all the things that I believe about right-wing politics, but I hadn't accepted it, right? I was becoming more and more distrustful. Things like this, right? 1 month, I went on holiday to Thailand. I walk in a coffee shop and I see the most beautiful woman on earth, who is now my wife, and she is Ukrainian. I go to Ukraine. Literally, during the war, I've been to Ukraine many times, and I've experienced air raids. I've heard bombs go off.
There again, more attacks. Putin must be having a slow day.
All the while, I look on my phone at all the right-wingers talking about Ukraine, and they believe that Zelensky is like, I don't know, a blue-haired feminist or something.
I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation.
This is my favorite clip, dude. Oh, this clip, man. This clip lives in my mind. It's like right up there with the Vosh clip of Tacoma Web. It's so good.
Right now is Ukraine.
And they're trying to say that it's actually NATO, and NATO are the bad guys, and America's bad, even though we're pro-America.
Okay, well, I found one disagreement. I mean, I am not in the pro-Russia camp at all. I'm definitely in the fuck Vladimir Putin camp, but I also am not exactly fond of NATO either. So there it is. This makes sense as to why he would be maybe pro-Destiny. He really jumped on the fucking pro-NATO. Second disagreement is coming.
America is bad. And, you know, I'm learning more about the Ukrainian conflict and all the history of how it came to be and why we defend them and why we can't allow Russia to just go and take over sovereign nations. And so you learn more and more about this. But then there was two people I come across that really like cemented the change, right? So I'm becoming distrustful of the right. I'm starting to see, like, you know, their takes on Ukraine as being ridiculous. And then I come across a streamer. So right now we're deep in the sort of Andrew Tate era. Andrew Tate has blown up, and at first it was kind of, you know, it was kind of fun. It was like, especially if you're sort of a young right-wing libertarian type, you need to get strong to look after yourself, look after women, looking after the people you love. Like that sort of stuff was kind of nice. I started going to the gym, I started doing all that stuff. I was always sort of into the self-help stuff, so all that shit sounded good. And then he started to talk about women.
You want to know why NATO is bad? Remember everything I talked about with like right-wing movements, reactionary movements, fascist movements growing in Western Europe especially? That's NATO, okay? That's it. NATO is a mechanism of enforcement of American empire, okay? It's a protection racket, and Russia's militant actions in Ukraine, its unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, is quite literally a perfect gift to NATO. That comment is too much, is it? It's too much if you don't know anything about NATO, if you don't know anything about the history of NATO. It's also pretty funny to come to a Turkish chatter stream who grew up in Turkey, who, you know, directly understands NATO's involvement in his country in a similar fashion. Turkey is a NATO nation, and Turkey had its own version of Operation Gladio, which eviscerated, during the Cold War, which eviscerated any sort of left-wing movement in the country. So NATO was a very good way for America to come in and beef up all of the right-wing fascists in the aftermath of World War II that had died out and were getting absolutely owned understandably, by the resistance groups, the partisans, the communists, the socialists, the trade unionists that actually had fought to liberate their own countries and fight against the Nazis. NATO comes in, immediately reasserts the dominance of fascist, right-wing militant groups, causes decades of instability, oftentimes direct acts of terror, bombing campaigns, things like that. Paired up with the Marshall Plan, it recreates the exact same former right-wing dominance in a lot of these countries.
Then you're seeing all these Fresh and Fit podcasts and Sneeko and all this crazy shit, and you're seeing like people making their entire livings.
The fall of the Ottoman Caliphate was worse for the world than 1989 sabotage of the USSR. This is the take I just came up with right now, listening for the last 3 minutes. Okay, first of all, you cooked. Okay, you cooked.
Complaining about women, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And there was one bruh who would go on these shows, and his name was Destiny.
Women fare a lot better post-divorce than men do, bro. And the reason why is because they get the resource, they get the money, they get the children, they get put in a better situation financially.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
dude, they get the house. Moms don't live good on child support. That's not true. What? Have you ever seen a bitch on child support? She's not living the greatest fucking life.
Women fare worse than men in almost every degree after divorces. So the idea of pretending...
What are you talking about?
They make more money. They have better dating strategies afterwards. Men just do...
How'd this man go from Owen Jones to Destiny, bro? Like an actually well-read left-wing journalist in the UK who's like written entire books to like guy who talks fast and dunks on some of the dumbest people. And like, I don't agree with everything that Owen Jones has done, obviously, but I still appreciate his voice, especially in the piranha pool that is British media.
Do better than women in almost every single metric post-divorce.
What? Bro?
Destiny was really interesting because he was a lefty and he was proud to be a lefty. He didn't try and hide. He didn't say it was like a...
I think this interview in and of itself this interview itself shows that he's not a lefty. I say interview because it was supposed to be a debate, and then they just agreed on most positions. So much so that even Lex Friedman was like, "Wow, you guys agree on you surely agree on a lot."
Centrist. He was like, "No,
do you not agree with Owen Jones?" I think he was harsh on Jeremy Corbyn. He also was like seemingly on the fuck Jeremy Corbyn. He's anti-Semitic train a little bit. He's had a couple different moments. I think he's evolved from those positions, but he has some of those L's. We all have our own L's, it happens.
On the left, but he didn't play into like the left-wing woke crazy stereotype. He was just a normal dude who presented left-wing ideas but was really good at debating. Now remember, debating the left up until this point was Ben Shapiro debating a 4-year-old. But now you're seeing someone who's actually quite well versed in the beliefs of the right wing, debating them.
Yeah, he's well versed on the belief of right wing, all right. so well versed that he became them on many positions.
And winning a lot. So I get into Destiny, right? And I even was going to make a video on Destiny. I might do it again one day. And I had a conversation with him on a stream, but I was so right-wing at the time, I didn't know how to make the video because I kind of had this mental block between really asking him sort of questions. But then the final nail in the coffin for me, at the point where I realized I was no...
Maybe sometimes a little too intimate with the right wing.
No longer right wing, was when I came across Gary's economics.
You need to have structures in place in your economy that prevent the rich from taking all of the wealth. If you don't have that, history teaches us the rich get all of the wealth. And once the rich have all of the wealth, ordinary people end up with very poor living conditions. If you go to countries that are very unequal, India, South Africa, almost anywhere in Latin America, very unequal societies lead to very poor living standards.
Gary is like a working class geezer and he became super wealthy as a trader, and his whole thesis was that income inequality is gonna get worse, and he betted on that. He made money predicting that, and it came to fruition. Income inequality has got much worse. And what's interesting, right, is he talked about income inequality and why it was bad and why it's bad for house prices and cost of living, etc. But the thing is, and I don't know if he doesn't really talk about this too much, but it unlocked this vault in the back of my brain. It was this old memory of a clip that Jordan Peterson had put out. And it was him talking about the correlation between income inequality and crime.
You always hear this idea that poverty causes crime. That's a classic left-wing idea, but it's wrong. What causes...
Is it? God, the confidence of like right-wingers and just being wrong never ceases to amaze me. Being a right-winger, being a reactionary of any sort is basically just being so endlessly confident in being wrong. Like, I don't even think there's enough. If you were to look at historic academic literature on material conditions, social conditions, whatever you want to call it, like, and the likelihood of crime manifesting in that, there is overwhelming data, overwhelming research, okay? Even from, like, it's like a basic position that even criminologists believe, right? And I wouldn't say that I'm like in agreement with a lot of the, I would say, pseudoscientific stuff that that you hear and you learn from in criminal justice education. And even then, it's like, it's almost like it's just one of the most consistently held positions. If only you knew that making less than 30K a year somehow makes you intrinsically a criminal. How can you not see this? Yeah, it's like, it's so funny. It's so funny to just like look at all of that data. Like, it's like ancient Greece, they had these opinions, okay? And then you just go, it's all wrong. That's all you need to do. Just say, it's wrong. Actually, people do crime because they're spiritually bad.
This crime, especially aggressive crime, is relative poverty. Poverty is when you don't have enough to eat. Relative poverty is when the guy next door has a much better car than you.
The right wing.
Oh wait, he's right. Never mind. I took it back. I'm taking it back. I was wrong. He is not wrong. Jordan Peterson there is right. Relative poverty absolutely is why crime occurs. Yes, this is an ancient Peterson take. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. He's talking about wealth inequality. I clip-chimped myself. I was wrong.
Really love to argue about culture. They always say that, like, it's people's, the problems in society comes from people's ideas and beliefs and their values, which is super convenient, right? Because when anything goes bad, you can just say that, oh, well, it's because people.
He's wrong. I mean, he's not wrong. Sorry. Fuck. He's right. I'm so used to saying Jordan Peterson is wrong. He's absolutely right. All poverty is technically relative, so it's like kind of weird to get lost in the minutia of being like, well, you know, relative poverty. It's like, yeah, the people now, poor people now, as opposed to like really, really poor people now, as opposed to really poor people 60 years ago, are somewhat better off, right? A really poor person during the Great Depression 100 years ago is dying. A really poor person now, still living on the streets, but still has like a smartphone. That is relative poverty. That is the reality of relative poverty. But I don't make that distinction because relative poverty is just poverty. That's how poverty manifests. That's why it's really silly when you go, excuse me, sweetie, there are starving children in Africa. Why are you worrying about your own shit? It's like, that's an idiotic argument to make, right? Most people understand that that's a stupid thing to say because you're matching poverty to you're matching your own material conditions to those around you, to your immediate neighbors, to people that are within reach. It's fucking ridiculous.
Like lazy or they're radical Marxist or this. All the while, there's no solution to that, right? What can you do? You can't change people's minds. So it's just like, oh, well, I guess we just have to accept the status quo. But when you fundamentally challenge that view, the sort of outcomes come from.
That's why we always make fun of right-wingers who are like, oh, how can you say you're being oppressed? There's a McDonald's in every corner. It's like, yeah, you're a fucking idiot, dude. Like, oh, great. I guess everybody has iPhones, so it's fine if you don't have a house. You don't need shelter anymore because you have an iPhone.
Culture and people's individual decisions. And you start to realize that outcomes, you know, like negative outcomes, crime, poverty, people having less families, having less kids, that maybe doesn't come from culture. Maybe the reason that men and women aren't having kids and getting married isn't because they're no longer Christian and they don't believe in families and the nuclear family. Maybe it's because no one can fucking afford to have families. Maybe it's because most people in their 20s still haven't moved out of their parents' house. Maybe it's because they don't make enough money between two people to afford to have a child. There's all these things that are happening, and you realize that probably the economic system is causing this. And it isn't just that the testosterone levels in men have dropped because, I don't know, they've fucking touched receipts or something. And so, yeah, the sort of like the needle drop, is that the expression? The pin drop? It all sort of made sense. I realized that I actually don't think everything is culture, and I think mainly things come from economics. I think most culture.
I DM'd Jimmy the Giant and said I'd love to have him on to talk about this video and his like radicalization cycles if he would like to come on to talk about it.
Culture comes from economics. And like, yeah, of course, attitudes, values, beliefs, they also have an impact. But I think You cannot.
When I watched the video for the first time, I wrote this video off because of the Destiny stuff, but you being more charitable to him has helped me do the same. Definitely can't hurt to have another guy like this here in the UK. Yeah, I think the UK political sphere is like a cesspit for the most part, with some obvious exceptions. So I'll take any fucking guy who fights back against like the Tommy Robinsons of the world, and especially has like a level of charitability and is using his own personal journey of like unlearning certain positions that they previously took for granted. I'll always be on board with dudes like that, even if I have disagreements with them at certain points.
I cannot understate economics. And so from there, as I've had my fucking left-wing epiphany, my left-wiffany, I start to really realize like kind of the woke stuff. Yeah, it's annoying. Do we need to argue about if there's an egg in a salad emoji? Is that really that important? And you start seeing like, I don't know, Matt Walsh, where he's done this whole documentary, What is a Woman? And he's the expert in this. Going on Joe Rogan, being asked how many kids are on puberty blockers because this is the real fucking moral panic.
How many people have had this done? Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, millions.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
If your politics spends more time talking about, I don't know, what toilet a transgendered person is going to piss in, or the woke brigade, if it spends more time on that than the cost of living, the housing crisis, rising inequality, things that, you know, are actually important and actually affect your lives, if you're more focused on the former, then I hate to say it, but you've been bamboozled.
Google react to radical vegans screaming away by removing the egg from their salad emoji.
So what?
What about my rights as somebody who loves eggs to have the egg in the emoji?
I mean, I'm sorry, you're like a deeply unserious person. The moment that you fucking say that, the moment that you allow those words to like escape your mouth, I don't give a fuck if there's like plenty of people in your hug box that are going around being like, no, this is actually a proper geezer, okay? You are like a pathetically unserious person. What the fuck are you doing? You're pissing and shitting in your diapers over this shit. This comes from a place of privilege, okay? That's it. It comes from a place of just like having so much privilege that you are seeking out random things to be upset about. Like everything else is so set for you that you have to be like, oh, society is under fire because of this issue. Now, this is obviously like the most inconsequential and most idiotic one. The more devastating versions of this are when people like Piers Morgan or reactionary propagandists will capture the attention of a lot of working class people by channeling their anger at a visible target and claim that minority is actually responsible for all of the pain that they're experiencing.
It's an endless trope. These sort of moral panics, these clutching of pearls over social issues tend to seemingly always happen when there's economic problems. Like I think it was in the 70s where they tried to ban Dungeons and Dragons, the board game, because it was satanic and demonic. It just so happened that the 70s was like a massive economic crisis. And so, yeah, the more I made these videos...
This guy's awesome. I mean, he has solid fundamentals. Like, I don't give a shit that like Destiny played a role in him understanding that like a lot of these dumbasses on the right are just stupid, but his fundamentals are there. Like he understands it. He's there. He gets it.
The more I started to see these patterns, right? These patterns between the 20s and the 30s, the rise of fascism in the West, and how that seemed to tie in with the Great Depression. And then, you know...
Like he is diametrically opposed to the liberal values that Destiny presents. Like this kind of commentary is far closer to my understanding of the world than whatever Destiny presents on any given Sunday. I don't know. He usually just like shifts his positions depending on who he is arguing against, but yeah.
Notice that in the 70s and the 80s, you see the rise of the National Front, the racists and all this sort of stuff. That just happened to be the same time as stagflation.
I don't like D, but isn't ultimately good that he can pull reactionaries over, like D in some sense, meeting them where they're at? No, because if you fucking pull reactionaries over and then you keep them in your cult, and you also exhibit a lot of reactionary tendencies, and you don't give them the tools to actually move away from reactionary ways of thinking, you're not actually de-radicalizing them. What are the chances of ever renewing the D-Hasan bond? They are less than zero. Come on, man. He spent the past 5 years trying to ruin my fucking life, and it has been a demonstrable failure, but it still hasn't stopped a shit ton of people from being open-minded to my position. Like, it's just not, if he had not spent the last 5 years aligning himself with neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and the like to engage his very cultish community to actively cyberstalk me, and they're literally hate watching right now, clip shit out of context and brigade it, put it all over LSF, all over subreddits, all over Twitter. If he hadn't done that, maybe. If he wasn't so adamant about his right to be able to say the N-word as a white guy, maybe. Bro, he literally says the world would be a better place if you died. I know. Not only has he said that, but he's also highlighted people from his community that have like actively come up to me in the real world. So it's not that crazy to say, yeah, a person like that, I think it is very hard to maintain charitability. Very, very, very hard to maintain charitability with a guy like that.
And the oil crisis. And then now, lo and behold, 2024, we're in big economic problems, and it just so happens that the far right is on the rise, and the Tommy Robinson Farage followers are now throwing bricks at mosques. It's a repeatable story, and like when I've made these videos, you start seeing these patterns and you start seeing how it plays out, and it always comes back to economics. And like, look, I have no hatred towards people who are on the right. I actually feel a lot of sympathy to most right-wingers, because being where they were, I understand that they've kind of just been manipulated, typically. They've trusted people who present information that try and rile them up, that make a lot of money from doing so, and they distract them from real issues. And the thing is, they're feeling the real issues. The real issues are affecting them, and they're trying to work out why. What is it? And the right will always try and find scapegoats to point at. It always does it. And like, as I've learned more, as I've read the book from George Monbois, The Hidden Ideology of Neoliberalism, Yanis, I can never say his name, Vokoris or whatever, his book, Techno-Feudalism.
Okay, come on, dude. This guy fucking loves Yanis Varoufakis. Like,
Neoliberalism. Yanis, I can never say his name, Vokoris or whatever, his book, Techno-Feudalism. I kind of realized, like, the argument should be about economics. The more I learn about the left and right economic theories.
This guy's great, dude. This guy's fucking dope.